Hello, and welcome to this video on word divisions, or you can call them word breaks. The question is, when do you join words in an orthography, and when do you split them apart?
Word divisions are a real issue in some languages, but they are not an issue at all in other languages. For example, Thai runs all the words together with no breaks. Other languages have lots of breaks. Lisu of Thailand puts a space between every syllable. And for Da of Côte d'Ivoire, almost every word is one syllable. For languages like these, you don't need to worry about word divisions.
Well, these are interesting, but let's talk about when we do need to pay attention to word divisions.
First, let's talk about parts of words, the parts that have meaning. We call these morphemes. A morpheme can be a root, like true, a prefix attached to the beginning of a root, like untrue, a suffix attached to the end of a root, like truly. And there are other kinds of morphemes we'll talk about later. For most languages, you build a word by joining morphemes. But languages don't all do it the same way. In the Koni language of Ghana, dabike means the small stick. It has three morphemes. Da is stick, B is small, and K is the. These three morphemes join together to make one word in Koni, but in English the three morphemes are separate words. They are also in the opposite order. So, one language may join morphemes into one word, but another language may separate those morphemes into different words.
How do you know when to join morphemes into one word and when to separate them?
That's the main point of this video. We start by looking at some linguistic tests. Sometimes one test will point to joining the morphemes, but another test will point to separating the morphemes. So I will say a test votes for joining or votes for separating.
Okay, let's hear about these tests. Some tests are complicated. Can we start with an easy test?
Yes. First, test 1. Can you say the morpheme by itself, or do you always have to add other morphemes? Let's look at small, b, in the Koni example in dabike. Koni speakers won't say b by itself. They have to attach it to another word, like small thing or small stick. So the vote goes for joining the morpheme small to the root morpheme. In English, you can say small by itself, like if someone asks you, "Is your house big or small?" Small. So in English, the vote goes for separating small as a separate word.
Some tests involve grammar. Can we hear about those?
Our second test is grammatical, the movement test. Can you move the morpheme to a different place? In Lendu of the Democratic Republic of Congo, you can say, "I have not drunk water," in two ways, either with not at the end of the sentence or not earlier in the sentence. Because you can move it, that votes for separating not from other words.
And the next grammatical test?
Our third test is insertion. Can you insert a word or words of a different category between the morpheme and other morphemes? Here is an English example. The answer is unknown, and the answer is not known. Un and not mean the same thing, but you can't put anything between un and known. So we join the un to known. But in the second one, we could say the answer is not really very well known. So we write not as a separate word.
There is one more grammatical test, I think.
Our fourth test is substitution or replacement. Can you replace the morpheme you're looking at with a known whole word, or even replace it with a phrase? If you can, then that votes for it being a separate word. We can say, he went to the store, and substitute other words for he, like, many people went to the store. So he is a separate word.
Those tests are grammatical. Are there any tests that have to do with phonology, how the sounds of words work?
Yes, our fifth test is phonological. The word is a unit, a single thing. Often there is a pattern or rule that happens only inside a word. So if you say a morpheme one way when it's next to one root, but say it another way when it's next to a different root, then that morpheme is acting like it's part of that word and should be joined. Remember the koni dabike. Why did we join the last morpheme k, the? Here's more information. Nuke is the arm, baka is the dog. The can be either ka or k. It depends on the vowel in the root. So we vote for the to be joined.
Here's something else. When I talk fast, I think I'm joining words, and some sounds get lost. How do we write those?
This actually brings up two new tests. Look at this from Malila in Tanzania.
Havana
Is children, and
Havana Avinji
is many children, literally children many. If people say it quickly, the end of the first word drops out.
Havana Vinji.
Our first decision, do we separate these or join them? Both of these can be pronounced as separate words, so our first test votes for separating them. We still need to decide, do we write this or this? Now for the new tests. Test 6. Write a word as people say it carefully, not as they say it quickly. Then the spelling of the word will be the same all the time, and people will recognize it easier. This votes for abana, not aban.
You mentioned two tests that apply here. What is the other one?
Test 7. Don't write a word with a syllable pattern that is not allowed in careful speech. There's never a Malila word that ends in N. Actually, all syllables end in vowels, and all words end in vowels when you pronounce them carefully. So, writing aban is a bad choice. So we want to write it like this, with separate words and writing that vowel.
This is getting long. Are there other tests?
Actually, yes. These are based on the meaning, semantics. Test 8. If a part of a word has no meaning by itself, join it to the rest of the word. For example, English, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. The mun, tus, and wens have no meaning by themselves, so should be joined to day. A speaker would also never pronounce these by themselves, so our first test would also apply. But here we are talking about meaning.
And meaning relates to compound words, too.
Yes, a compound word, or just compound, joins two or more roots together. but the result is a word with a new meaning. A blackboard is not just any board that is black. Usually we would join these. Here is an example from Ngiti in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ata is year, akpa is something long. Put them together, and this means a type of cooking pot. Quite a different meaning from the roots. These should definitely be joined into one word. We will talk about hyphens later. Sometimes a language will put two words together, and they could be either a compound or a possessive. Let's imagine a language. If you put child and knife together, does it mean a child's knife? Or could it be a compound, child knife, meaning maybe a claw of a bird? You can usually know if it is a compound by thinking about the meaning of the whole word and its parts. Sometimes you can also know by other linguistic tests. It's possible to have both in one language, so you'd separate child knife when you mean the child's knife, and join child knife when you mean claw. You want to be able to tell these apart. In a tone language, another test for compounds is the tone across the whole thing different from the tone of the parts? If it is, then write it joined together.
Sometimes a morpheme is kind of in between. That is, you can move it like a word. It can be next to different classes of words, but it shares a phonological pattern with the word it's next to.
These in-between words are sometimes called clitics. And yes, sometimes language is complicated. Here's an example from the Gamg language of Sudan, the morpheme that means with. Let's look at what with is next to. We have with fox, with man of Kood, with person who remains behind a house. In the first case, with is a and next to the word fox. In the second, with is e and is next to the word Kood. In the third case, with is a and is next to the word behind. It is always at the end of a whole phrase. Our test of insertion votes for writing it separately. However, with is either a or e, depending on which word it is next to, and so it shows phonological unity with that word. So the phonology test votes to join it. Also, you can't say with by itself. The votes are in favor of joining with, and that is what they did. Sometimes the decisions are not clear. It is good to test people's reading to see if people read one way better than another. See video 21 on testing. And often, even after thinking a lot and doing all the tests, the decision is just, what do people prefer?
I see you have used a hyphen sometimes. When should you put a hyphen in, and when should you just join the morphemes?
Again, this often depends on readers' preferences. But here are some guides. If a morpheme is a prefix or suffix, we usually just join it with no hyphen. If it's a compound, we usually do want to connect the morphemes in some way. You can write them totally joined, like this, or with a hyphen, like this. If it's a clitic, an in-between type of morpheme, sometimes these are separated, sometimes joined with a hyphen, or even joined with an apostrophe.
Where to put word divisions can be simple in some languages and complicated in others. Sometimes, no matter what the tests show, local speakers have a preference. This might be because they like how another language does it, or maybe some other reason. For an acceptable orthography, these preferences should always be taken seriously.